Hey everyone, welcome back to the Engineered Angler. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to make a hybrid treble hook. Now there's several manufacturers producing these things and selling them. And they're basically just a treble hook with a swivel attached to it and a willow blade or some sort of spinner blade on it. And you can attach it to a crankbait as a belly hook attachment or a tail hook attachment. Or you can even go on a topwater and put it on either tail or on the belly. Now, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be a willow blade. It doesn't have to be chrome. It can be any color you want. It can be small. It can be large. It really depends on your fishery, the species you're going after, the kind of lure you're going to put it on, how big that lure is, and how big the hooks are that you're going to use. So since there's so much variety, there's going to be a ton of ways to make this. But I'm going to show you a couple of ways that I make it and a design of spinner blade that I came up with and that I make, and I'll show you how I make it. And if you're interested, stick around. Alright, so here are some basic components. These three blades are slightly different in different sizes. This is, I believe, a number 2 Colorado blade. It might be called something else. If you know what it's called, let me know. Put it down in the comments. I'd be happy to hear it. This is a willow blade. It's number 3, which means it's 3 centimeters. And this blade I made myself. I call it a coffin blade because it sort of has the shape of an old-timey coffin. And typically you're going to want to use some sort of swivel. Now, all of these swivels probably equivalent as far as how easy they swivel. The only difference is size. This is a number 8. This is a number 10. That's a 12. And this is a 14. And I really like using the 14 because typically I'm using smaller treble hooks. This is a size 4 treble. But what you're going to see on the hybrid hooks that you're going to see in the store are these number 12s. And they work just fine, especially if you're using a number 4 or larger hook. And this little split ring right here is a 3mm split ring. And they're kind of hard to find. So you'll have to order that online. Now I'm going to go ahead and put links in the description below the fold, so be sure you click on read more down there for everything that I have a good source for. But if you guys have good sources for any of this stuff, put it in a comment. I'm sure everyone would be really grateful. And you know, when I first started making these and using them on my lures, the main question I had was, do you really need a swivel? And I think you don't. Does it really matter whether the blade is spinning or if it's just wobbling around? It's up to you, I guess, and your own aesthetic. I'm going to make it with a swivel so that you can see how it's done. It's just as easy to do it either way. So I'm going to show you how I attach either a loop or an actual swivel to the hook, and then I'll show you how I make my coffin blade, and we'll assemble a couple of them completely. So let's go ahead and do the swivel one first so you can see how you can actually achieve the same thing you see in the stores. So before we get too far along, let me just point out something that may not have been totally obvious on this one that I already made. You can see it has a little tiny mini snap. So it's a snap swivel that I attached to this treble hook. And what I like about it is that I don't have to worry about tiny little split rings, and it's real easy for me to replace this blade with a different color or a different size. Here it is with a little Colorado silver blade. And here it is with a more traditional willow blade. The only difference is, of course, it extends farther away from the base of the hook itself. But I'm not sure that matters much. Sometimes it's just nice to be able to quickly change out colors and see if you can draw a strike just by doing that. All right, let's start out with this tiny little number 14 swivel. Attach it to this number 4 O'Shaughnessy Bend Gamakatsu hook. And these are nice hooks, because I really like the short shank. All right, so the first thing I like to do is to cut off one of the little loop legs. And it doesn't take much. And all it really leaves is the intermediate barrel. And the trick is getting it jammed in there just enough so it doesn't want to fall out while you're gluing it. And I know that looks a little bit dicey. First thing you got to do is get a drop of UV resin in there. And I'll take my UV flashlight and hit that little bit of glue with the UV flashlight just to get it firmed up. And you can see it stays in there now. Now that it's in there nice and straight, I'm going to put a droplet right at the base here, and I'll turn on my larger spotlight. Although I can do this with the little flashlight, but this is powerful and gets it done quicker. And then I'll just keep rotating this and applying a little droplet and setting it. Takes about 5 seconds. And then I'll do it again on the next little separation between the hooks. And after I've gone all the way around, I'll give it a little extra time, maybe 15, 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds. Sometimes if I'm making a bunch of them, I'll just put it on my little motor turner. And this goes a lot more quickly if I'm not explaining it and filming it. Now, if you don't have UV resin and UV light, you can do this with crazy glue, but I recommend you use an accelerator. This will make it go very quickly. You just have to be careful not to glue your hands to the hook. All right, now let me show you how I do it without a swivel. All right, I'm going to need a piece of this number 5 43-pound test stainless steel leader wire, and the diameter on it is 0.014 inches. And I have a little piece of scrap, so I don't need to open that package. So all I really need is about 1 1/4 and 1/4 inches of this stuff. It's real easy to bend and real easy to cut. And I'm going to use these little mini conical wire pliers. And I'll come up about 1 inch down close where it's a very small diameter, and I'm just going to wrap the wire around nice and tightly, and then I'll come back and grip it really close to the end of the wire loop, and I'll bend backwards a little bit, and I'll do the same thing on the other leg. And what this does is it forms sort of a little bit of a shoulder in it and makes it a little more uniform when you put it on. All right, so I'm going to cut it off so I have about 5/8, 3/4 of an inch. And you end up with this little tiny hairpin looking thing. And for this demonstration, I'm using this size 4 O'Shaughnessy. It's a standard shank. And all you have to do is straddle the hooks with the 2 legs on this thing and slide it back. Now at this point, you can either attach it just like this, or you can save yourself a step and attach your blade on it before you attach it to the hook itself. Of course, this means you don't have a swivel, and that may or may not bother you. Let's go ahead and attach it just like this. All right, so you don't have to do these next steps if you don't want to. You can simply put some crazy glue on this and a spritz of accelerator and call it a day. But I want to add a little color to it, so I'm going to go ahead and whip this on here with some fly tying twine. And I'm going to use some red twine because I think it'll just look really cool. And it's just a matter of giving it a relatively even winding all the way across, so you get a nice flash of red, and that wire loop gets snugged up against the shank of this hook. Now remember, none of this is going to take any real load, and I'll finish it off with some half hitches. And at this point, you could just get some crazy glue and put a nice coating of crazy glue on it, and that would hold it nice and firm. But I'm going to go ahead and use my UV resin, since I've got a nice handy bottle of it, and that should do it. Let's go ahead and put this under the UV light, and we'll leave that spinning. All right, so I've got the first one out of the UV light. Let's go ahead and put this little willow blade on it. The willow blade already has a little tiny split ring, which is a pain to handle. I open it up with my fingernails. And you can see that the swivel still works, just in case you were wondering whether I glued up the swivel. You can see how nice and professional that looks. And it looks like you might have bought it at Bass Pro. Now, I really like this larger blade that I make, especially since I usually use these things in salt water, and I think I get a better flash, and it's a little more enticing to the fish. Let me show you how I make it. So I took my original design drawing and I converted it to a little plastic template. And then I take that template and I trace it on to a piece of stainless steel. Now this is a piece of 0.019 inch thickness, and I think that's 0.52 millimeters. And I find that that's just the right thickness. It's easy enough to cut, and you can put a little bend in it without really struggling. And to cut it, I'm going to use these Channel Lock brand tin snips. These things are really sharp and real stout. Make easy work of this. And the glare from this thing is probably going to be difficult to work around. But I'm going to do a snip. And don't worry if you're doing this that you end up tweaking the metal a little bit and putting some little bends in it, because you can flatten it out later. And I can adjust my cut a little bit. It looks a little random right now, but you'll see that it'll come out nice and squared up. All right, so it's got a little bit of wonkiness to it, but I'll just take it out to the shop and flatten it out with a plastic hammer. All right, so I'm going to flatten it out on something relatively smooth. So I have this scrap piece of aluminum. I'm just going to lay it down on there, and I've got a plastic headed hammer, and I'm just going to tap it down. Doesn't take very much, and that should have it. It's pretty flat now. Now I'm going to take and remove some of these little micro serrations that are there from the little cutter and round off the corners just a little bit before I actually drill a hole in this. All right, that's pretty nice and smooth on all the edges. Now you can take and use a little bit of really fine, like 800 grit sandpaper, and just give it a nice rub down with it, and it'll smooth out too. All right, now I'm just going to give it a little punch mark so I can get the drill started. And I'm just using a little tiny 1/8 inch drill bit. Nothing special. This stainless steel isn't really that hard. So now I can actually peel off the little protective coating and reveal a really shiny edge to it. All right, and so the next step is to put a little bit of a kink in it right down the center line. And the way I do it is I'll take this little hinge, it's a 2-inch hinge, but it works perfect for this, and I'll line it up just beyond the center point, this side of it. I'll lock all this down with a pair of locking pliers. And it doesn't take much force. The next step is just to gingerly give it a bend. And all I do is kind of push it up against a hard surface, or not too hard a surface. This is a piece of wood. And get it to sort of give it a little bit of a kink. And if you take your time, you can usually get a pretty good clean bend on it. And there you go. Nice little bend on it. All right, so after cleaning up, it looks pretty nice and shiny. And since that blade is a little larger, I also made another one of the hybrid hooks, and I used the next size up hook, a number 2, and the next size up swivel, which is a number 12. And let's assemble this and see what it looks like. All right, that looks pretty cool. I think this will look great on a nice kind of larger lure. I think that's pretty cool. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. I think even on a really flashy lure like this, that's gonna provide just that little extra flash that maybe will make the difference in getting a really good bite. So I'm hoping that tomorrow we'll have some sunshine. It's been raining for the last 3 days, and I can get out on the dock and get some nice shots in the sunshine. well, thank you for watching. Thanks a lot for sticking around even though we weren't making lures. These little builds really kind of enhance what you have, and it also enhances some of your skills. And a lot of you are so much more creative than I am. You'll probably come up with even nicer techniques and prettier results than I did. So if you enjoy these kinds of builds, give me a thumbs up and let me know. And if you've got suggestions for builds that you would like to see me do, let me know, put them in the comments, and I'll do my best to get around to doing them. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next Friday, I guess.